The Bluebird Diner sat just off the main highway, about 10 miles from Langley Air Force Base. It wasn't fancy, just a simple place with blue vinyl booths, the smell of fresh coffee, and the constant sizzle of the grill. For 5 years now, Lily had called this place her second home, pouring coffee and serving comfort food to locals and military folks who came through the doors. The Tuesday evening rush had finally died down. Rain tapped gently on the windows as the sky darkened, outside. Lily's feet ached as she moved between tables, refilling coffee cups and clearing plates. Her blonde hair was falling from its ponytail, and she'd spilled ketchup on her pale blue uniform hours ago, but she still had 3 more hours before her shift ended. As she wiped down a recently vacated booth, the bell above the door jingled. A young man walked in, shaking raindrops from his jacket. He was maybe in his late 20s, with short dark hair and the straight posture that screamed military, though he wore civilian clothes, just jeans and a simple gray sweater. His eyes scanned the half-empty diner before he slid into a booth. In Lily's section, she grabbed a menu and a coffee pot, approaching with the professional smile she'd perfected over the years. "Evening," she said. "Coffee to start?" The young man nodded, barely making eye contact. "Please." As Lily poured the steaming coffee, she noticed something in his expression, a heaviness, a worry that seemed to weigh down his shoulders. She'd seen that look before, especially on the faces of military personnel. Sometimes they carried burdens they couldn't share with just anyone. "Special today is meatloaf," she said, setting the menu down. "Kitchen makes it pretty good." "Just coffee for now, thanks," he replied, wrapping his hands around the mug but not drinking. His fingers tapped nervously against the ceramic. Lily nodded and moved on to her other tables, but she kept glancing back. For 20 minutes, the young man just sat there, staring into his coffee, occasionally checking his phone, his coffee growing cold and untouched. After finishing with her other customers, Lily found herself drawn back to his table. Something told her he needed more than just a refill. "Mind if I freshen that up?" she asked, gesturing to his cold coffee. "No charge for refills." He looked up, almost surprised to see her there. "Oh, sure." As she poured, she took a chance. "Rough day?" The young man's eyes met hers, seeming to consider whether to brush off the question with the usual, "I'm fine." But something in Lily's face must have felt safe. "Big test tomorrow," he finally said. "Been preparing for months." Lily nodded, understanding. "School?" A slight smile touched his lips. "Something like that. Job evaluation, I guess you could say." "Must be important," she observed, noting the tension in his shoulders. "Everything's riding on it." He shook his head slightly. "Sorry. Don't mean to dump this on you." "Hey, sometimes it helps to talk to someone who doesn't know all the details," Lily replied, setting the coffee pot down and sliding into the seat across from him for just a moment. The diner was quiet enough that she could spare a minute. "I'm Lily, by the way. Jack," he said, offering his hand. "Well, Jack, I don't know what kind of test you're facing tomorrow, but I do know this." She leaned forward slightly. "The fact that you're worried about it probably means you care enough to do well." Jack took a sip of the fresh coffee, seeming to truly taste it this time. "Had a setback last week, started doubting myself." Lily nodded. "I get that. 3 years into nursing. School, I failed a critical exam, nearly quit." "What'd you do?" Jack asked, genuine interest replacing some of the worry in his eyes. "Reminded myself why I started in the first place. My grandma needed better care than she got. That was bigger than one bad day." Lily shrugged. "Sometimes we need to look past the moment, you know." Jack's expression shifted subtly, something clicking into place. He straightened slightly, as if physically setting aside a burden. The cook rang the bell, signaling an order was ready. Lily stood up. "Duty calls. But hey, whatever this test is tomorrow, remember it's just one day in a long journey." Jack nodded, a genuine smile finally appearing. "Thanks, Lily. I needed to hear that." Little did she know that her simple act of kindness would come back to her in the most unexpected way. The dinner rush hit the Bluebird Diner hard that evening. A bus had broken down nearby, bringing in 20 unexpected customers all at once. The kitchen was backed up, the cooks shouting over the sizzle of the grill, and Lily was running between 6 different tables trying to keep everyone happy. "Order up." Tom, the cook, called out, sliding 2 plates of steaming meatloaf onto the counter. Lily grabbed them, balancing them expertly as she weaved through the crowded diner. She delivered the food with a smile that hid her exhaustion, then glanced over at Jack's table. He was still there, his coffee cup empty again, staring out the rain-streaked window. Something about the lost look in his eyes tugged at her heart. Despite the chaos around her, Lily grabbed the coffee pot and made her way to his table. "Refill?" she asked, already pouring before he could answer. Jack looked up, a bit startled. "Thanks. You're really busy. You don't have to check on me." Lily shrugged, watching the steam rise from his fresh cup. Everyone deserves a little attention, especially when they look like they're carrying the weight of the world. She meant to move on. Table 9 was frantically waving for their check, and Table 12 needed extra napkins. But when Jack spoke again, his voice was quiet. "I keep making the same mistake," he said almost to himself. "In simulations, I mean. It shouldn't be happening at this level." Lily paused, sensing this was important. "Whatever you're training for, you said it's tomorrow, right?" Jack nodded, running a hand through his short hair. "Yeah. Final evaluation." "Look," Lily said, making a split-second decision. She glanced at her watch. "I've got a 10-minute break in 15 minutes. If you're still here, maybe we can talk?" Sometimes fresh eyes help. Before Jack could respond, she was called away by another customer. For the next 15 minutes, she rushed around the diner, refilling drinks, delivering food, clearing tables. When Betty, the other waitress, finally arrived for her shift, Lily sighed with relief. "I'm taking my break," she told Betty, untying her apron. She grabbed a cup of tea for herself and slid into the booth across from Jack, who looked surprised to see her. "You actually came back," he said. "Said I would, didn't I?" Lily blew on her tea. "So these mistakes you keep making, what's going on?" Jack hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I can't give specifics, but there's this sequence I have to perform. High pressure, split-second decisions. I keep second-guessing myself at the same point." Lily nodded slowly, understanding he couldn't share details of military training. "My brother was a firefighter," she said instead. "He used to freeze up during ladder drills. Turns out he was overthinking it." "What did he do?" Jack asked, leaning forward slightly. "He started singing in his head." Lily laughed. "Sounds silly, but it worked. Said it kept the overthinking part of his brain busy while his training took over." Jack considered this, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "That's actually not bad advice. Sometimes the simplest tricks work best." Lily took a sip of her tea. "You know what else? My nursing instructor told me something I never forgot. She said, 'Your body remembers what your mind forgets.' If you've trained enough, trust that." Jack was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Nursing school? You mentioned that earlier." Lily nodded. "Third-year student, working here to pay for it. Double shifts most days." "That's impressive," Jack said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Why nursing?" "My grandma got sick when I was in high school," Lily said, her eyes growing distant with the memory. The difference between the nurses who just did their job and the ones who really cared, it was night and day. I wanted to be the second kind. As she spoke, Jack's posture changed. His shoulders relaxed slightly and the worry lines on his forehead softened. He wasn't just listening to her words, he was connecting with them. "You know," he said finally, "I've been so caught up in the technical aspects of what I do that I forgot why I started in the first place." "And why did you?" Lily asked. A genuine smile spread across Jack's face. "To protect people, to make a difference." "Then focus on that tomorrow," Lily said simply. "Not on what could go wrong." The diner's phone rang and Betty called out that it was for Lily. "That's my son's school," she said, standing quickly. "I've got to take this, but hey." She paused, meeting Jack's eyes. "You've got this. Whatever it is." As she hurried to the phone, she had no idea that their brief conversation would change both of their lives in ways neither could imagine. The call from her son's school was nothing serious, just a reminder about tomorrow's field trip and the permission slip Lily had already signed. With that worry eased, she headed back to the dining area, now noticing that the rush had finally died down. Most tables were empty, a few customers lingering over dessert or coffee. The rain outside had stopped, leaving the parking lot glistening under the streetlights. To her surprise, Jack was still at his booth, nursing a fresh cup of coffee someone else had poured him. He seemed to be writing something in a small notebook. Lily checked her watch. Her break had ended 10 minutes ago. "Everything okay with your son?" Jack asked as she approached, looking up from his notebook. Lily nodded, touched that he remembered. "Just about a field trip. 7-year-olds and museums. What could go wrong?" she joked. Jack smiled, and Lily noticed it reached his eyes this time. The heavy cloud that had surrounded him earlier seemed lighter now. "You're different from most people," he said unexpectedly. "How's that?" Lily asked, sliding back into the booth. Betty had the other tables covered, and the manager had gone home early with a headache. "You really listen," Jack replied, closing his notebook. "Most people just wait for their turn to talk." Lily shrugged. "Guess that comes from nursing training. Half of healing is listening." "Is that why you decided to become a nurse after your grandmother got sick?" he asked. "Partly," Lily said, surprised he'd remembered that detail too. "But there's more to it. Where I grew up, options were limited. Small town in Idaho. Blink and you'd miss it. Most people stayed, worked at the factory, or the farms, but not you," Jack observed. "Not me," Lily agreed. "I moved here 4 years ago. Just me and Tommy, that's my son. His dad wasn't in the picture." She paused, wondering why she was sharing so much with a stranger. Something about Jack made her feel comfortable, like talking to an old friend. "Was it hard, moving with a young kid?" Jack asked. "Terrifying," Lily admitted. "But sometimes the scariest decisions turn out to be the best ones. What about you? Where are you from?" Jack hesitated, then said, "Small town in Colorado. Mountains everywhere. My bedroom window faced Pikes Peak." "Sounds beautiful," Lily said. "It was." Jack nodded, a faraway look in his eyes. "My grandfather had a workshop behind our house, built model airplanes with me every Sunday after church." "Is that when you fell in love with flying?" Lily asked. Jack looked startled. "How did you know I fly?" Lily laughed softly. "Lucky guess. The way you talked about making split-second decisions, your military bearing, plus we're near an Air Force base. Wasn't hard to figure out." Jack smiled again, more relaxed now. "Started with those models, then paper airplanes, then real ones. First time I flew solo was the best day of my life." As they talked, the diner emptied further. Tom called from the kitchen that he was starting to clean up. Outside, the night had fully settled in, stars appearing in the clearing sky. "What happened last week?" Lily asked gently. "The setback you mentioned?" Jack's expression darkened slightly. "Training exercise. I froze at a critical moment. Could have been bad." He tapped his fingers on the table. "My instructor said I overthink, just like you mentioned about your brother. And tomorrow's your chance to prove him wrong?" "Tomorrow's my final evaluation," Jack confirmed. "If I pass, I get to keep doing what I love. If not..." He left the sentence hanging. Lily reached across the table impulsively, touching his hand briefly. "You'll pass. Remember what I said. Your body remembers what your mind forgets." "I'll remember that," Jack promised, then glanced at his watch. "I should go. Early start tomorrow." As he stood to leave, he pulled out his wallet, but Lily waved him off. "This one's on me. Consider it good luck for tomorrow." "I can't let you do that," Jack protested. "Sure you can," Lily insisted. "Just pay it forward someday." Jack hesitated, then nodded. "I will. And thank you, Lily. Not just for the coffee." As he headed toward the door, Lily called after him. "Hey, Let me know how it goes? Jack turned back, a determined look on his face. I will. Somehow. Neither of them realized just how literal that promise would become. The morning sky was just beginning to lighten when Jack arrived at the base. Stars still dotted the dark blue canvas above as he walked across the tarmac, his flight suit crisp against his skin. Other pilots nodded to him as they passed, everyone focused on their own missions for the day. Ready for this, Lieutenant? Captain Wilson asked, falling into step beside him. The captain was a veteran pilot with thousands of flight hours and little patience for mistakes. Yes, sir, Jack replied, hoping his voice sounded more confident than he felt. Inside, his stomach churned with nerves, but he kept his face calm. The F-22 Raptor waited on the runway, its sleek form gleaming in the early light. One of the most advanced fighter jets in the world, worth over $150 million, would soon be in his hands. Jack paused for a moment, taking in the sight of it. This wasn't just any test flight, it was his final qualification. Everything he'd worked for came down to the next 90 minutes. As he approached the aircraft, he recalled Lily's words from the night before. Your body remembers what your mind forgets. She couldn't have known how perfectly that applied to flying. He'd completed these maneuvers hundreds of times in simulators and dozens of times in actual flights. His body knew what to do, if only his mind would get out of the way. The pre-flight check went smoothly. Jack methodically inspected every inch of the aircraft, then climbed up the ladder and settled into the cockpit. As the canopy lowered, sealing him in, he felt the familiar combination of claustrophobia and exhilaration that always came with these moments. Tower to Raptor 47, you are cleared for takeoff, crackled the voice in his headset. Jack eased the throttle forward. The powerful engines roared to life, pushing him back in his seat as the jet accelerated down the runway. In seconds, he was airborne, the ground falling away beneath him. Altitude 3,000 feet and climbing, he reported, his training taking over. The sky opened up around him, vast and blue. The first part of the test was straightforward, basic maneuvers to demonstrate control of the aircraft. Jack executed them precisely, feeling his confidence build with each successful turn, climb, and descent. Proceeding to combat simulation, Captain Wilson's voice instructed through the radio. This was where Jack had faltered before, the high-speed decision-making required in simulated dogfights. As he banked the aircraft sharply, preparing for the first engagement, he felt the familiar doubt creeping in. What was it Lily had said about her brother? He sang to keep the overthinking part of his brain busy. Jack hadn't sung since high school choir, but as the first simulated target appeared on his radar, he found himself humming an old country song his grandfather used to play in his workshop. The simple melody occupied just enough of his mind to let his training take over. The jet responded to his touch like it was an extension of his body. He rolled, climbed, and dove, tracking targets and executing textbook maneuvers. The doubts that had plagued him receded as muscle memory kicked in. Executing Cobra maneuver, he reported, pulling the aircraft into a rapid climb, then reducing speed dramatically while maintaining altitude. A complex move designed to force pursuing aircraft to overshoot their target. Clean execution, Lieutenant, came the surprised response from his evaluator. The final challenge was the most difficult, a series of high G turns and precise weapons targeting while maintaining optimal altitude and speed. This was where he had frozen last time, overthinking the sequence until it was too late. As Jack approached the test zone, he remembered something else Lily had said. Focus on why you started in the first place. Why had he become a pilot? The memory of his grandfather pointing out planes in the Colorado sky surfaced in his mind. The model airplanes they'd built together. The first time he'd seen an air show and decided this was what he wanted to do with his life, to protect people, to make a difference. With that thought clear in his mind, Jack executed the final sequence perfectly. Each targeting solution locked in precisely, each maneuver flowing naturally into the next. No hesitation. No second guessing. As he brought the F-22 around for landing, The sun had fully risen, bathing the world below in golden light. Jack felt a lightness in his chest that had been missing for months. Whatever the outcome of the evaluation, he knew he'd flown his best. The landing was as smooth as glass. As the jet taxied to a stop and the engines wound down, Jack took a deep breath, removing his helmet. The cockpit opened, and he climbed down the ladder to where Captain Wilson waited, clipboard in hand. One look at the captain's face told Jack everything he needed to know. Captain Wilson's face broke into a rare smile. "Outstanding performance, Lieutenant. Best I've seen in years." Jack felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thank you, sir." "Whatever got into you today," the captain continued, "bottle it up. That's the kind of flying we need." Several other pilots approached, clapping Jack on the back and offering congratulations. The tension of the past weeks melted away as Jack accepted their praise, but his mind was already elsewhere. He was thinking about the diner, about Lily, and about the strange way a conversation with a kind stranger had helped clear his mind when nothing else would. After debriefing and completing his paperwork, Jack found himself walking toward his commanding officer's office. He knocked on the doorframe, standing at attention when Colonel Davis looked up from his desk. "At ease, Lieutenant," the colonel said. "Wilson tells me you passed with flying colors. Congratulations." "Thank you, sir," Jack replied, then hesitated. "Sir, I had a request I wanted to run by you." Colonel Davis raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." "It's somewhat unusual," Jack warned, then explained about the waitress at the diner, how their conversation had helped him overcome his mental block and the idea that had been forming in his mind since he'd landed. The colonel leaned back in his chair, studying Jack's face. "Let me get this straight. You want to do a special flyover of a diner to thank a waitress?" "Yes, sir," Jack confirmed, standing straighter. "I believe it would also serve as positive community relations." "Denied," Colonel Davis said flatly. "We don't use multi-million-dollar aircraft for personal thank yous, Lieutenant." Jack had expected this response, but he pressed on. "Sir, with respect, the Air Force does community engagement flights regularly. This would be no different from the flyovers we do for schools or sporting events. Except it's targeted at one person," the colonel pointed out. "One person who represents the support our local community provides," Jack countered. "And the diner serves many military personnel. It would be good for morale, both on base and in town." Colonel Davis tapped his pen against his desk thoughtfully. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No, sir," Jack admitted. "I believe it's important." The colonel sighed. "I'll tell you what. Run it by public affairs. If they see a PR opportunity and approve it, I'll consider it. But," he added as Jack turned to leave, "you'll need to work out the logistics without disrupting any scheduled training." "Thank you, sir," Jack said, unable to hide his smile. The next 3 hours were a whirlwind of meetings. Jack spoke with the public affairs officer, who initially seemed skeptical but became increasingly interested as Jack explained his idea. "You know," Major Chen from Public Affairs said, "we've been looking for ways to strengthen our community ties. A human interest story like this could be perfect. Local hero thanks everyday hero, that sort of thing." "Exactly," Jack agreed eagerly. By late afternoon, a plan was forming. The base photographer would document the flyover, the story would be shared on social media, and if all went well, it might even make the local news. But logistics remained a challenge. "We can't just have an F-22 buzzing a civilian building," the flight operations manager pointed out during their planning meeting. "There are altitude restrictions, safety concerns." "What if we coordinated with local air traffic control?" Jack suggested. "Plan it during a time when the diner's parking lot would be relatively empty?" Phone calls were made. Permissions were sought. Jack checked the diner's schedule, confirming that Lily would be working. The following afternoon, each obstacle that arose, he tackled with the same focus he'd applied during his flight test. As the day wore on, what had seemed impossible that morning gradually took shape as a feasible operation. By evening, Jack had assigned authorization for a community engagement flyover the following day at 2:30 p.m., coinciding with the end of Lily's shift. "There's one more thing," Jack told Major Chen as they finalized the details. I want to be there on the ground after the flyover. 2. See her reaction? Major Chen asked. Jack nodded. And to tell her in person what her kindness meant. As he drove home that night, exhausted but exhilarated, Jack wondered what Lily would think when she looked up tomorrow and saw an F-22 Raptor performing aerobatics overhead. Would she connect it to him? Would she understand the message he was sending? He couldn't wait to find out. The next day arrived with perfect flying weather, clear blue skies, minimal wind, and unlimited visibility. At the Bluebird Diner, Lily had no idea what was coming. She'd been on her feet since the breakfast rush, refilling coffee cups and delivering plates of eggs and pancakes to hungry customers. Her thoughts occasionally drifted to Jack, wondering how his evaluation had gone, but she had little time to dwell on it between orders. By early afternoon, the lunch crowd had thinned. Lily's shift would end at 2:30, and she was looking forward to picking up her son from school. Her feet ached as she wiped down tables and refilled salt shakers. You look tired, Betty commented as they passed each other near the kitchen. Tommy had a nightmare last night, Lily explained. Neither of us got much sleep. Well, at least, you're done soon, Betty said sympathetically. At the Air Force Base 5 miles away, Jack was going through his pre-flight checklist with extra care. This wasn't just any flight. Everything had to be perfect. He'd spent the morning reviewing the approach path and practicing the maneuvers he planned to execute above the diner. The base photographer was positioned near the diner's parking lot, as were 2 other officers who would coordinate with local police to manage any traffic or onlookers. Tower to Raptor 47, you are cleared for takeoff, came the familiar voice in his headset. Jack guided the powerful jet down the runway and into the sky, feeling the same rush of freedom he always did when leaving the ground behind. But today there was something more, a sense of purpose that made even the routine climb feel special. Back at the diner, Lily glanced at her watch. 20 more minutes until her shift ended. She brought the check to her last table, then headed to the break room to gather her things. Outside, a small crowd had begun to gather in the parking lot. Word of the special flyover had leaked, and nearby shop owners and customers had come out to watch. The base photographer checked his equipment one last time while the officers made sure everyone stayed in the designated safe viewing area. At precisely 2:28 p.m., Lily punched out and said goodbye to her coworkers. She pushed open the diner's door, stepping into the bright afternoon sunlight. To her surprise, instead of the usual quiet parking lot, she found a dozen or so people looking skyward, pointing and talking excitedly. What's going on? She asked an older gentleman standing nearby. Air Force is doing some kind of special flyover, he replied. Should be any minute now. Before Lily could ask more questions, she heard it, the distinctive roar of a jet engine, growing louder by the second. She looked up, shielding her eyes against the sun, and gasped. An F-22 Raptor was approaching fast, much lower than military jets normally flew over town. The sleek aircraft passed directly overhead with a thunderous roar that vibrated through her chest. The crowd cheered as the jet banked sharply and climbed, leaving a trail of vapor in the clear blue sky. But the pilot wasn't finished. The jet leveled off, then performed a perfect barrel roll, a complete rotation while maintaining its forward direction. Then it climbed higher, seeming to stand on its tail before executing a hammerhead turn that left everyone watching in awe. For the finale, the pilot brought the aircraft low again, this time performing a knife-edge pass, flying sideways with the wings perpendicular to the ground, directly over the diner's parking lot. The control and precision required for such a maneuver at low altitude were extraordinary. Who's flying that thing? Someone in the crowd wondered aloud. Must be one of their top demonstration pilots. Lily stood transfixed, her purse forgotten, at her feet, as the powerful jet completed one final pass before climbing away and disappearing into the distance. The crowd applauded and cheered, but Lily remained silent, a strange feeling washing over her. Something about the timing, the location, right over her diner, just as her shift ended, felt too coincidental. A crazy thought crossed her mind, but she dismissed it immediately. It couldn't possibly be. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of vehicles entering the parking lot. 2 military police cars and a dark SUV with Air Force markings pulled in, parking near the diner's entrance. The crowd's attention shifted from the sky to these new arrivals. The door of the SUV opened and a figure in a flight suit stepped out. The figure in the flight suit removed his helmet, revealing a familiar face. It was Jack. Lily's hand flew to her mouth in surprise as he walked toward her, a nervous smile playing on his lips. The crowd around them seemed to fade away as their eyes met. "That was you?" Lily asked, barely above a whisper, pointing skyward. Jack nodded. "That was me." "But how? Why?" she stammered, struggling to process what was happening. "You said to let you know how it went," Jack replied simply. "I passed the evaluation. With flying colors, actually." A small laugh escaped Lily's lips. "So you decided to fly a fighter jet over my diner? Most people would just send a text." "Didn't have your number," Jack said with a shrug. Then his expression grew more serious, "and a text wouldn't have been enough. What you did for me that night, it made all the difference." By now, people had gathered around them, curious about the connection between the waitress and the pilot. A man with a camera, the base photographer, though Lily didn't know that, was discreetly capturing the moment. "I don't understand," Lily said, shaking her head in amazement. "I just listened to you." "Sometimes that's all someone needs," Jack replied. "You helped me remember why I fly. You told me to trust my training, to focus on what matters, and you were right." He gestured to the sky where he'd just performed the complex aerial maneuvers. "Today was the best I've ever flown." An older woman in the crowd nudged her husband. "Isn't that the waitress who's always so kind to everyone?" "That's her," her husband confirmed. "Helped my sister fill out medical forms last month when she couldn't understand them." More voices joined in, customers recognizing Lily, sharing stories of small kindnesses she'd shown them over the years. A businessman mentioned how she'd rushed out to his car with the wallet he'd left behind. A young mother recalled how Lily had entertained her fussy baby so she could eat her meal in peace. Lily blushed, uncomfortable with the attention but touched by the unexpected recognition. "I just try to be decent to people," she said. "Nothing special about that." "But it is special," Jack insisted. "People like you make all the difference in the world. My commanding officer thought I was crazy when I asked permission to do this flyover, but then I explained about our conversation and he got it. He said we need more reminders that everyday kindness matters." One of the officers who had arrived with Jack stepped forward. "Lieutenant Anderson here is being modest. He's one of our finest pilots, and after today's evaluation, he's been selected for our elite demonstration team. The maneuvers you just witnessed are just a small sample of his capabilities." A smattering of applause broke out among the onlookers. Jack looked embarrassed, but pleased. "And all because of a cup of coffee and a friendly ear?" Lily asked, still struggling to believe the impact of their brief conversation. "Sometimes the smallest moments change everything," Jack said. "My grandfather used to tell me that. I never truly understood until now." The local news had arrived and a reporter approached, asking if they could interview both Jack and Lily about the unusual flyover. As they agreed, Jack turned to Lily. "I hope this wasn't too much," he said quietly. "I just wanted to show you that what you do matters, even when it seems small." Lily looked around at the gathered crowd, at the expensive military aircraft that had just performed aerobatics overhead, at the cameras now capturing their story, and finally back at Jack, standing tall in his flight suit. "It was perfect," she said with a genuine smile, "and I'll never forget it." As they turned to face the reporter's questions, neither Jack nor Lily could have predicted how far their story would travel. By evening, the video of the F-22 flyover and the heartwarming reason behind it had gone viral online. Local news became regional, then national. People around the country were touched by the simple truth at the heart of the spectacle, that a moment of kindness from a hard-working waitress had inspired a dramatic gesture from a grateful pilot. Their story reminded a divided nation that connections between strangers still mattered, that small acts of decency could have outsized impacts, and that sometimes the most powerful thing we can offer another person is simply to listen when they need it most.